Still waiting. See, this is what I was trying to figure out yesterday. And I forgot to tell Robert. I need Ahmed or ¿cómo se llama? I think that if I turn off my camera, the image pops up.
Oh, gotcha. Rohini?
Oh, you're muted. Dale abajo el micrófono. Ah, no, ya está. She's muted on her.
Rohini, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Your sound is good to go.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Hello, Paco.
Yes, it's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. No, I am excited, present, and anxious all at the same time.
So you're going to go up fourth, okay?
Okay. How much is there? Is there a time frame? Is this?
Yeah. Nothing too extensive, just like 5 minutes on the key points about what resources are out there during this crisis for the reentry population.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll come back to you right now.
No.
Marlene. Marlene, can you hear me? Marlene? Marlene? Yes. Connecting audio or connecting to audio. Marlene, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Marlene?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much.
Okay.
No, not that. Oh, Robert. Let me admit him. Just a minute. Hello, Dr. Hernandez. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. Marlene,
Yes,
do you happen to know how Carlos is connecting?
I don't know. Let me email him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, shoot. Okay.
Carlos, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Okay, you're on.
Okay. Okay, great. How are you today?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm well. Can you see me also?
No, we see it on the screen. It just says DCFS iPad. If I ask you to start your video, see if you can try that and see if we can see you. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Now we can see you.
Great.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you.
Do you want to make an announcement? Like, allow them all.
Yes.
That way you can start turning off people's.
Yeah.
Comments.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for Congressman's Juvenile Justice Roundtable. We will begin momentarily. I thank you all for your patience. Good morning, everybody. I would like to thank you all for joining us for our Juvenile Justice Roundtable as we discuss the effects of COVID-19 crises on our youth and some of the protective measures available for our youth during this very critical time. My name is Michelle Vergara, Field Representative for Congressman Tony Cardenas. I do want to share with you all that this meeting will be recorded. I encourage you all to contact our office if you have any questions. Our telephone number is 818-221-3718. Now I will go over some friendly reminders before we begin. Please be advised that this meeting will be recorded once again. I ask that you all please disable your video capabilities and mute your microphones during the duration of the presentation. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentations. If you have a question, please send it via the chat box. When it is time for the question segment at the end, we will select questions from the chat box. Once acknowledged on the call, your audio and video will become activated so that you may ask your questions. I ask that you please keep your questions within the topic of discussion. I would like to thank you all again for joining us this morning for our Juvenile Justice Roundtable as we discuss the effects of COVID-19 and some protective factors available for our youth during this critical time. Today, you will hear updates from Rohini Khanna from Los Angeles County Supervisor Hilda Solis's office, Carlos Torres and Marlene from the Department of Children and Family Services, Paco Retana from Wellness, Emotional Health and Wellness, Adriana, Clinical Social Worker, Elizabeth Lopez, Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development. Thank you to all our presenters for joining us today. At this time, I would like to give the floor to Congressman Tony Cardenas.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I hope everybody's doing well and everybody's safe. And also, I know that people like yourselves, you worry about other people being safe. So let's continue to put that energy out there to everybody that we care about and the people, especially the people we haven't met yet, who are all fighting for every single day, especially those youth that in this country that has so much potential still doesn't get it right when it comes to treating our youth, when it comes to them needing an opportunity to be understood rather than being incarcerated or punished. I'm continuing to fight for all of the young people around the country and ensure that whether they're documented or undocumented, they're getting justice. It's very difficult for us to do at the federal level. As you're well aware, we have Steve Miller, who's the #1 advisor to President Trump, and too much of his antics and his philosophy makes it into too many parts of the federal legislation and federal interpretation of legislation, et cetera. I'm not going to bore you with details of legislation or what have you. We're still pushing really hard. People like Bobby Scott from Virginia, who chairs the Education and Labor Committee. He's been a champion on juvenile justice and on many other issues. And we're all continuing to work together with the Progressive Caucus and many others. So just wanted to say thank you for coming together and looking forward to hearing what the presenters have to say about what's going on in the streets today with COVID-19 being the dominant factor in all of our lives. And everybody knows, especially all those of us on this call, we all know how difficult it is for the folks among us who have the least resources to deal with these kinds of issues or any issues for that matter. So I just want to say thank you for doing all the wonderful work you're doing every day. And there'll be opportunities for everybody to chime in and say a few words or ask a few more questions as well. So we'll continue with the presentations.
Thank you, Congressman. At this time, I would like to introduce our first guest, Rohini Khanna. She's the Justice Deputy for LA County Supervisor Hilda Solis with the 1st District.
Hey, can you hear me?
Rohini,
Yes,
welcome.
we can hear you.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Congressman, and thank you for your words. So I just wanted to give a quick kind of update about how things are going in LA County, specifically regarding the incarceration of youth and how that's being addressed by the board currently. So On March 31st, Supervisor Solis with Supervisor Ridley Thomas filed a motion asking the probation department, along with all of the justice partners, so the public defender's office, the alternate public defender's office, the district attorney's office, and the health departments to do a couple of things. So first, to continue to identify as many youth as possible for early release, based on, you know, whether they had been in the camps or the halls for a number of months and were making progress on their case plans, if they had any sort of medical vulnerabilities, or if their violations were considered low enough that they could be safely released into the community and cared for there. The supervisor is deeply concerned about, as we know, the majority of the youth in these facilities have experienced severe trauma previously, which is part of the reason that most of them are there. And so she's concerned about how this is compounding their trauma. The motion wasn't filed until March 31st because there was a delay in hosting some of the board meetings. And so prior to that, our office, along with some of the other board offices, began encouraging the justice partners to convene and identify youth for early release. At that point, the probation department did release all of the young people that they had jurisdiction over, but that number was quite small. It was just around 10 or 12. So the majority of the youth at this point are under the court's jurisdiction, and it is up to the court to determine whether or not to release young people in probation's care. And right now the court is doing that on an individualized basis. So they are hearing each case individually for each youth. Probation, along with the justice partners, have identified 50 to 60 young people per week that they believe could be released, and they're making those recommendations to the court. At this point, it looks like about half of those cases are being released, but the other half are being denied.
What's the involvement of the public defenders in this process?
So the public defenders have been reviewing their own caseload to determine if there are young people that they can either recommend to probation, the probation add on the list, and the public defender's office, the alternate public defender's office, and the independent juvenile defender office are also identifying individual cases that they have, and they're submitting petitions to the court on their own. So while about half of the cases that were referred by probation were denied, another 20 to 30 cases over the last several weeks have been released that were initiated just by the defense offices. So the defense offices are really taking it upon themselves to identify as many young people as possible, to push the courts as much as possible. And they have also participated in conversations that led to a petition to the California Supreme Court for a writ against the juvenile court in LA County to expedite some of these releases and really look more carefully at these cases in a more collective way, rather than looking at each case individually, given the need for urgency.
Okay, thank you. And does the county, has the county recorded any COVID-19 cases amongst the staff and or the young people in these facilities?
Yes, so I believe there have been about 8 cases among staff, and those staff have been isolated. At this point, none of the young people that have been tested have tested positive. So currently we have 0 cases among youth, which is promising and I think makes us all hopeful, but I think everyone is just kind of holding their breath until we get that first positive case, which is more than likely. But at this point, sorry, I'm just looking at my numbers. At this point, it looks like 187 youth have been released from the juvenile halls since March 2nd, and 96 youth have been released from the camps. So there has been about a third decrease in the population in both of of those sectors, which is promising. So the supervisor is continuing to encourage that those numbers continue to go down, and that we use all of our available resources to do that.
Thank you. Anybody have any immediate questions on those factors?
Thank you again, Rohini. Again, I encourage everybody that's joining us today virtually via the Zoom. There is a chat box where you can go ahead and enter your questions, and we will go ahead and address them at the end of the presentations. Again, thank you so much, Rohini.
Sorry, can I really quickly add, I apologize for not adding this, but one really good piece of news was that at the beginning of March, there were 4 pregnant young people in the juvenile halls. At this point, all of those pregnant young women have been released, given their particular vulnerability. And so we were able to identify alternate placements for each of them. And so at this point, there are no pregnant young women in the camps and halls, which is very promising.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For that. Up next, our next presenter is Adriana, clinician whom has experience working with youth in detention. Adriana, the floor is yours. Welcome. Adriana, can you hear us? Hello? Adriana?
She's muted, right?
Adriana?
There's somebody.
Okay, we'll come back to her. In the meanwhile, I would like to go ahead and introduce our presenter, Paco Retana, who's the Vice President of Programs at Wellness, Emotional Health and Wellness.
Good morning, Congressman. Thank you for your introduction and just putting this together. So really appreciate the work that you're doing and your leadership. And to the rest of the participants here, there's a lot of unsung heroes and sheroes out there that are doing amazing work too. So thank you for just your participation and focus. I'm going to just share a little bit about what we're doing here at Wellness, but as we're serving both mostly our South LA community, but also parts of Los Angeles. Since our healthy, ready culture and safer at home order, a lot of our staff are now teleworking from home. So, however, I do want to lift up that we do have certain programs that are providing services to our community. So for example, we have our Access and Wellness Center. So anybody could walk in to access and request for mental health services at this time. We're following the CDC guidelines. We have questions that we ask that are recommended by the Department of Mental Health to just make sure that everyone is safe in using the PPEs and our staff, et cetera. But they can come in through our Access and Wellness Center to obtain mental health services. And at that point, we do an intake and set them up in that way. So we have staff for that. We also have our Avis and Mark Ridley Thomas Life Learning Center that is open. Those are youth that are transitional age youth. So this is the population that we're really working with and the population that we're talking about now. They come in, whether they want, some of the youth may be coming in to either wash their clothes, get support from our counselors that are on site, and also even intake. So we have a relationship there with Kilpatrick, and they come in, and if there's a youth that's on probation, we will definitely do an intake with them and then welcome into either our independent living program for housing and or provide mental health services. Wellness is a nonprofit organization. A lot of our funding comes from the Department of Mental Health. So we are 0 to 25. So I just wanted to just share that piece of it. So we have our Access and Wellness Center. We do early intervention and community wellness as well. So we're really doing a lot of intervention and prevention work for our 0 to 5 population, working with families there. I mentioned the Avis and Mark Ridley Thomas. I'll circle back with that in a few seconds. We have outpatient, our traditional outpatient services that, again, we're teleworking as well. And we provide psychiatric services and our intensive services as well. Our intensive services, again, is what they call our full service partnership, wraparound. A lot of our kids come from, that are referred from probation and or DCFS, and we're continuing to provide the services there. I do want to lift our staff that are managing that program from the information that I was able to get from Natasha Bryson and Amanda de Loera, who are two of our directors, and Victoria Class, who's our service provider, was able to just, again, provide some valuable information for this particular presentation and the work that they're doing. Our staff, though, even though the majority are teleworking, we do have staff that are actually continuing to do field-based services. What that means is if there's a situation that there's a safety-related issue, perhaps there's some suicide or some severe depression, or as we all know, our families are there's a shelter at home, and families are together, and there's a lot of stress in general that we're all experiencing, coupled with their mental health issues. So we're on the alert. We are doing home visits to be able to make sure that we're managing those situations. And obviously staff are also concerned about their own safety, but they go in, they wear a mask, they have their gloves, they're maintaining physical distance, but mental health services are not on timeout, let's just say, right? There's major concerns. We are posturing towards providing as well. We have a robust school-based mental health services, and a lot of the referrals come from the schools, but at this point they're trickling in. At this time, is most of their focus has been on education, so we're just getting ready for more referrals to come from the schools. Just going back to our Life Learning Center and just including our wraparound services, that's where we're hoping that some of the kids that are being released, mentioned earlier, about 1/3 of them are being released. We're really hoping there's other legal entities like ourselves, like Wellness, there's Shields and other legal entities and Department of Health that's also providing services for this vulnerable population. So this is something that you could look into the resources in your community that they should be continue to provide these services. We are open, we are not shut down. We are managing cases as they come in, and that's the current process that we have at this time. I'm gonna pause there, and I'm not sure if there might be any other questions that are out there. I can continue to address some of the models or philosophies that we look at when we're working with some of the youth that are coming in from our camps and juvenile hall, if that's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Paco. Again, I encourage you all to use the chat box, please, and write your questions in. For now, we will go ahead and move on with our next presenters. We have Carlos Torres, Division Chief of LA County Child Protection Hotline, and Marlene Calderon, Assistant Regional Administrator for the DCFS Van Nuys office. So welcome. I will go ahead and have Carlos begin. Thank you, Carlos. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's great hearing about the leadership and the fact that children are still being serviced. That is why we exist at DCFS. As you all know, LA County is just a tremendous, big entity. If it was a state, it would be the 10th biggest state in our country. So protecting the 2 million children that live in LA County is actually a big task. And it's actually has become even more complicated right now with the crisis that we are facing. So I'm here today just to kind of talk about what's happening at the intake process, and just to let everybody know that our department, all 20 regional offices, our command posts that respond to child abuse call referrals in the evening, on weekends, that our hotline that is operational 24/7, answering calls, that we are still fully operational. We are taking calls, we are conducting investigations, and we are managing all open referrals and all open cases. So we are here. Of course, like everybody else, we are concerned because statewide, our call volume has dropped 50%. On a typical April day, like today, we would be getting 1,000 calls. Right now, we are only seeing 400 to 500 a day. So we are concerned. We believe that abuse probably is still occurring, but it's being underreported. So we want to just urge the public, urge all our partners, all 48 law enforcement agencies in Allen County, all our departments that we partner with, probation, DPSS, the sheriffs, mental health services, that just to let you all know, we are still here. We want to get those calls, 1-800-540-4000, 1-800-540-4000. We have 161 social workers that operate the facility 24/7, 27 supervisors and 5 managers. We are always on site, always available. So we want to urge the neighbors, the tias, the tios, the uncles, the postmen, the delivery people, the Amazon people. If you see something and you suspect that a child might be in danger, please call that number that I just provided, call law enforcement, and we need to basically keep our eyes on these kids. So we want to just go ahead and stress that. I'm handling the intake process of it all. My colleague Marlene is going to handle what is actually happening out in the fields during investigation. So I think that I've covered enough with what we're doing here at intake, and also the concern that is being shared in the media by our board of supervisors, by our director Bobby Cagle, our chief deputy director Ginger Pryor, that we are in a crisis, but we are operational, and we need everybody's cooperation, everybody's assistance, and to be our eyes and ears to ensure that children are safe during this crisis.
Thank you so much. Marlene, you can go ahead on now.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman Cardenas. I really appreciate all the effort that you're doing in putting this meeting together. I think it's an important, thing to do, because everyone is working under challenging times. And as you know, our emergency response and continuing services social workers are first responders. And in our Van Nuys office, they have continued to assess child abuse and neglect in the same manner, just following safety protocols, health protocols that have been put in place by our directives coming from our health partners. We have been, as Carlos mentioned, our calls have dropped, but we have continued to go out and assess. Our ER workers are going out in person to do assessments of the families by interviewing, making home assessments using their PPE. We have also seen a consistent topic of allegations that we've been investigating in regards to, neglect, in regards to physical abuse, emotional abuse. It has been consistent, although the calls again have dropped. It is my understanding that we have also continued, if necessary, to seek removal orders when children are in dangerous situations. And our courts have continued to hear those detention hearings, and also, the need to obtain removal orders. In regards to our efforts in continuing to provide reunification services to families, our social workers are continuing to assess how that is happening, whether it's through virtual visits, in-person visits, as long as everyone is following the social distancing and health protocols, again, that have been put in place, allowing relatives to monitor visits when seems feasible and safe. Also, our community partners have been a vital piece to assist us in providing the tangible things that our families need, like food, like gift cards, like face masks. We have been getting thousands of cloth masks that we have been donating to families and children during these challenging times. And also for our staff, we've been getting donations for cloth masks for even our staff from some of our community partners. We have continued to provide a financial assistance through our community-based liaison by screening cases, referring families to the Children's Trust Funds, screening for family press services, doing special payments, and all of those things, in-kind donations, sharing of information through resources with our community partners like DPSS, LA County, food pantries, and all of that. So I have to say we have been very blessed to have a workforce that is all about teamwork and working together for the benefit of our children and families that we serve in our communities.
Marlene, roughly what percentage, at least by your experience, or that you can, or Carlos can tell us, are Spanish-speaking calls, Spanish-speaking family, households, etc.?
It varies from region to region, but I'm going to go ahead and say that about a third of our cases require a Spanish-speaking worker to respond.
Okay. And what does your gut tell you about the confidence level of the Spanish-speaking households calling in? Is it unfortunately low, your gut tells you, or you think that they have the confidence of calling that the Spanish-speaking community? You follow what I'm saying?
It's a little tricky though, because typically the calls that we get, though the client and the family might be Spanish speaking, it's not usually they themselves calling. It's a mandated reporter. But you know, we are appropriately staffed 24/7 with Spanish speaking workers, and you know, whether you're answering a call here at the hotline or responding to a referral at 3 in the morning, you know, in Van Nuys in South Central, the worker answering the phone, the worker responding is very, very well trained in core practice model and engaging and in building trust with that family, regardless of whether they speak Spanish, English, Korean. Very, very culturally sensitive in the work that we do. And we would like to believe that and I think the evidence shows that we're pretty good at engaging with families and in building that trust, despite the fact that traditionally the department, even when I was a little kid, I mean, we did not see DCFS in a positive light. But I think now that we actually do the work, I'm doing it 25 years. It was 25 years this past Monday. You know, it's very, very proud work that we do. And I think the people that do it, especially right now, are proving why they do it. We all talk about child safety, but right now we are actually all doing it. We're all here wearing masks, responding, answering those phone calls, because it's time to pay the piper. It's like we talk about child safety. Now is the time to actually do it and show it. And we're very, very proud of our workforce from bottom to top. Whether you're a clerical person or whether you're the director, all of us have answered that call, and all of us are really, really doing what we need to keep children safe. So to answer your question, I think that if there is lack of trust, we are bending over backwards to establish that trust and build confidence, and let them know that the local government is behind families, regardless of where they were born and regardless of what language they speak. It's very, very clear. All 5 board supervisors from bottom to top, we all have the same message, and we all have the same mission.
Thank you, Carlos.
Congressman Cardenas, I would like to also add that for the Van Nuys office, who covers Pacoima, who covers Panorama City, who covers Arleta, Sun Valley, Van Nuys, our Spanish-speaking population is higher than the English population. So our Spanish-speaking staff, their caseloads are higher. However, that has not been a factor in providing the same services to families and children. In fact, one of the things that our office has been doing since last year is strengthening our partnership with our education partners through local schools. Last year we started working with Vaughn Elementary, with Vaughn Next Century Learning Center, with Hazeltine Elementary, with Pacoima Charter, in building these relationships. So in those 3 schools, we have a supervisor who is the lead, along with 1 or 2 of their social workers who is a liaison to the school. And through this pandemic, they have been continuing to communicate with those schools when situations come up where you know, a family may be in need of like the tangibles, like the food, like perhaps a referral, clothing. We have been providing those things from the relationships that we have established to those particular schools. And we just were having momentum when all of this happened, that, you know, it has kind of, we had to stop our efforts, but we will continue to build on that, because we've been providing to the school staff mandated reporting trainings that are continuing to happen virtually. We have also been providing workshops to parents where I myself and the supervisors have gone out to start, you know, sharing, educating parents about child abuse. What is child abuse? What is neglect? So we have been working hand in hand with these schools, local schools, to reduce the number of child abuse and neglect situations in our community.
Thank you, Marlene. Next presenter.
Okay, thank you. So up next, we thank you both to Carlos and Marlene for that wonderful information. Our next presenter is Adriana, whom is a clinician with experience working with youth in detention. She will talk about some of the best practices for working with youth who are currently detained. Adriana, you are now live. Please welcome. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle and Congressman. Just to make sure, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'll just be speaking a little bit about, give you guys a glimpse of what I've been seeing here in the halls specifically. There's definitely a heightened anxiety among all the youth here, an increase in irritability for 2 main reasons that what I've been seeing. One of them, obviously, not knowing what is happening outside of the facility. A lot of worries around family and how their families are doing. In addition to that, there's also been some releases in the facility. So a lot of the youth that are still here are kind of wondering, well, what about me? Like, you know, my peers leaving, but what about me? So some of the things that I've been doing here as a clinician and my colleagues as well is definitely helping them stay connected, feeling them like, making them feel like they are still connected to something or someone outside and even within the facility. I think for many of the young people in here, one of their biggest fears is being forgotten. So definitely we staying connected with them, whether if it's through a phone call or dropping something, whether if it's coloring pages, art supplies, something where they can feel like they can stay motivated and encouraged and hopeful about what comes next. Contact with family is definitely key. Like I said, most are worried about their family. So I think having those phone calls on a daily or twice a week definitely helps them in general. A lot of psychoeducation being provided on an individual level. So hopefully it's something, I'm hoping that's something that can be provided across the entire facility to all youth. But I have seen that it's being provided individually. One thing that I also wanted to highlight was definitely helping them gain a sense of control. They already don't have a lot of control while being detained, and now with having this whole pandemic and hearing about it from staff and from those that are still on the inside, it's very chaotic for them, and it's hard for them to understand. So it increases their inability to feel like they have any control of what's happening in their lives. Are there any questions so far?
Adriana, I have a question. When it comes to staffing levels, any difference since the COVID-19 pandemic shifting?
Yes, there's a lot of staff that is out due to pre-existing health conditions that prevent them from being in the facility. So there's been a lot of shifts within among staff here. Definitely less staff, but those that are still here are definitely taking on the cases and continuing to maintain that contact with the youth here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Adriana, what would you say are some of the protective factors for youth inside these facilities with everything that's going on and not knowing potentially when they may be released, when they may be able to visit their family again?
Protective factors, well, definitely, like I said, staying connected with family, whether if it's through the phone. Oftentimes their calls are limited. So as a working clinician, one of the things that I've taken on is just contacting their families to see how they're doing outside, and then helping them, and then providing that update to the young person. Yeah, that's one of the things. Additional protective factors. I think definitely advocating on their behalf. I think there is a lot of downtime now for clinicians because there's less youth. We are seeing less youth here in the facility. So now connecting with legal teams and inquiring on their behalf, like how can we support hopefully an early release for them, and how can we, talking and speaking on how the pandemic is affecting their mental health level while incarcerated.
Okay, great. Thank you. I do want to go ahead and call on Eduardo Mundo, who has a comment. Eduardo, you are now live.
Okay, thank you, Representative Cardenas. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Two things. One, I'm retired probation. It is my understanding that the field staff are being deployed to support the juvenile halls and in good numbers. Number two is I had a question earlier. They mentioned that probation had made recommendations for release, but the judges have denied the release. And I'm wondering if anybody's addressing that. And if probation is making a good case, why are the judges not releasing? And in yesterday's Times, there actually was a piece that illustrated that case. So I'm just interested in finding out if anyone's addressing that.
Good question. So there seems to be, whether or not, your question is whether or not there's a conflict between probation's recommendations and the courts either agreeing or denying those.
Yes, why they're denying probation recommendations is I'm interested in the underlying factors on that.
Congressman, I believe I can begin to answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rohini.
So, Eduardo, thank you for your question. I am sure that there are a number of defense attorneys on this call that probably have more specific information, but from what I understand, the criteria that the court is using to determine early release has not changed in the face of COVID-19. So the virus itself is not a factor for consideration. It's only essentially how long the young person has been detained, how much progress they're making in their case plan, and whether or not they can be safely released. So I don't have specific information about individual cases and the factors that the court is relying on. And my understanding is that the court is making most of these determinations essentially without a hearing. So just on their own without much information. I don't believe that it's because probation or the defense attorneys are not making a good enough case, but I do think that, as has been raised, the fact that programming and access to services has decreased because of the pandemic, that young people are at a disadvantage if they're being evaluated for their progress in terms of their case plans. So that is a really significant concern.
So Rohana, the bottom line is the final word is the court.
Yes.
So probation can evaluate, recommend, but the final decision is up to the court, or a particular judge is assigned to that case.
Right.
Is there anything that's going on at the supervisor's level to either have the courts address the supervisors as to what their criteria is? Are they taking into account any other factors, or do they feel that that their hands are tied and they can't take in other factors when it comes to release?
So I think, to be honest, we have not gotten much explanation from the courts on this, given that the courts are a completely separate entity from the Board of Supervisors. There hasn't been too much other than some of the supervisors urging a sense of urgency around this and really recognizing the need for additional release. I believe that at this point, the supervisor is hopeful that with the pending writ that has been transferred to the appellate court for consideration, that if the higher courts make a determination that puts some more pressure on the courts here, that we will see some sort of different outcome. It appears that in the last couple of days, there have been some increases in releases. So I don't know if the courts are shifting their position, but I haven't heard directly one way or another.
Congressman, can I make a point? This is Paco.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Just someone mentioned about protective factors. I do want to just underscore the importance as the youth are coming out from juvenile halls and camps. The risk factor, there's the need to make sure that we have sometimes it's called the warm handoff. So happens because the risk of homelessness with the youth, with this vulnerable population, the risk of increase of hospitalizations during this pandemic is also very compelling narrative that we need to address. And a lot of the agencies that are receiving services, at least has to be a really good transition plan where some of us are maybe going to the camp already, making sure that the family's connected, looking at a trauma-informed response framework, looking at a culture, looking at all the social determinant factors that are critical. And that's something that organizations like ourselves really are doing. I think 21 of our youth that have been on probation went into independent living, from probation went into housing. So I just want to underscore the importance of that as youth are being released, that we have a solid, robust plan that we are not setting these young people up to get incarcerated again. So that partnership that we all have with all the participants today is key. And I'm sure there's lots of great stories that's effectively working, and then there's other areas that what isn't working. So I just wanted to lift that up.
So Rohana, do we have any semblance of an idea in the last few weeks how many young people are being released? Is it an average of one a day? Is what seems to be the number?
Yeah, so let's see. I think overall since the beginning of March, in the juvenile halls, 187 young people have been released, and let's see, it looks like 13 in the last 10 days have been released from the halls, and then about 30 from the camps in the last 10 days. So
in the last 10 days, 40 plus.
Right.
Okay. Now, Paco, just from your vantage point, that number, 40 plus in the last 10 days, to have a warm handoff, how much of that do you think wellness has the capacity to be involved? Obviously, you have to be notified. You have to be able to be notified in order to be engaged. And how does that notification, how do organizations like yours find out? Do you have to sift through the records yourself? Do you get an email? Is there a system in place already where that kind of concern actually gets addressed while it's happening rather than happenstance.
Absolutely. So depending on where the 40 youth, for example, that we're talking about geographically where they're at, but there should be capacity for organizations like Wellness that are across the county or the city to be able to receive the youth, either through wraparound, either through DCFS, even through full service partnerships. 40 youth to me doesn't sound like a lot of youth. There should be the capacity. It's that connection that I want to make sure that that happens. So again, if they were in our geographic area, and we would be able to pick them up and start mental health services for them. And I think the transfer of care is critical. And so, for example, sometimes when the case is closed, the youth come back to a neighborhood that they already have beef with folks. So if we have that information up front so that we can at least assist with that transition, so that you're getting mental health services and you're also aware of certain risks that that particular young person is back in the community where they're, you know, they're having issues with. But 40 to me, Congressman, doesn't sound like a lot. Just it's that transition to make sure that when we come in that we're able to do that outreach and engagement and keep them.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paco.
And we also have Dr. Robert Hernandez, who has some comments regarding this issue. Dr. Hernandez?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hi, Congressman. Thank you for having this forum for us. I do want to kind of touch upon what Paco Rattano was talking about. This is where I would like to lean in on the status of our grassroots organizations, those who have the credibility in the communities, have the relationship with the communities, and, you know, Paco's highlighting a key component, that warm handoff, but also being engaged in the process. And I don't know how our CBOs are doing. CBOs like Maximum Force PCITI, Champions in Service, and others, who I believe should be a part of this strategy to be able to have that engagement with the youth as well. So I don't know if anybody could talk to that, because that's a critical component that Paco is highlighting, especially with this vulnerable youth that is most susceptible to the criminal justice system.
Anybody have an understanding of how that's working right now? Anything that they can share that has happened in the last, 10 days, 3-4 weeks, regarding the engagement and or awareness when these young people are coming out, and or who might be helping with that awareness?
So I actually have someone from the mayor's grid office who will also is one of our speakers. I think this is a perfect segue to go ahead and give her some time so she can share some of the updates over at the city level and potentially share more on things that we can do out in the community to help uplift our youth. This is Elizabeth Lopez, a Senior Regional Program Coordinator with the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction and Youth Development. Welcome, Elizabeth. The floor is.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Good morning, Congressmember. Thank you so much for bringing us together and for continuing to host these roundtables, even during this time as we all transition to virtual work in some shape or form. And thank you for all for being on and for sharing, for the speakers for sharing lots of great information. I know I have a lot of takeaways as well, and I'll touch on some points, and also regarding the question that was just raised in regards to our updates, because we continue to work with young people, families, and communities during this time. So from the grid office, like I mentioned, we are continuing to work with our contracted agencies. Some of them are working remotely, so telecommuting. Some of them are trying to find a balance, trying to do that, and then also either meet with their clients or families that they serve while practicing social distancing, and or supporting other kind of community events that they're partnering with, or supporting these different outreach efforts like the grab and go centers, the Angelino card distribution at the family source centers. So they're doing a little bit of everything while still ensuring that we're addressing their safety while they're out and about, checking in with clients, checking in with families and community members. So our team members are continuing to implement the model of services, which is a number of, at minimum, contacts that they need to have with their assigned clients and their families and the rest of the community. So all of that is being done like via FaceTime, via Zoom. A lot of education definitely is being provided around that in regards to just transitioning into virtual work and with our young people, right? And with families that may or may not have access to internet, for example, that might not be able to utilize these platforms. And so if it's just a phone call or text or FaceTime, that works as long as that contact continues. And our teams are doing an incredible job to ensure that there's consistency there, right? So that continues to happen. We usually have during the springtime a lot of events, a lot of partnered events with a variety of providers and other stakeholders in all of our communities across the city. Obviously, those events are not happening. So there is a transition in terms of engaging community members. And I think an opportunity that's definitely come up for our providers is just to ensure that as they're checking in with young people and families, that they're addressing immediate needs. A lot of our families have been impacted by COVID and financially. So if they lost a job, they were part of the formal or informal economy. A lot of undocumented families as well being impacted. So our teams are ensuring that they're more or less just being creative with the ways that we can still connect young people to the resources that are made available. So if that's providing emergency resources like groceries, if it's ensuring that they have the proper, let's say, supplies to maintain hygiene and cleanliness, and then also attach that to ongoing workshops or programming that we would normally facilitate in person, like at our different centers, at the different centers of our nonprofit organizations that we contract with. There's been a lot of success in regards to facilitating workshops virtually. And for example, dropping off materials that would be needed for this workshop to individual clients, and then our teams actually facilitating those workshops virtually. And there's been a great way, I think that's been just a great way to connect with young people overall. We're starting to see a variety of nonprofits, they're seeing great attendance at these workshops. So I think that it's a great way that they've been able to connect. It's definitely different in each community. And so that's another strength of our nonprofits that we contract with. They're definitely assessing, you know, what is the way that we can connect? What can we try out? What has been successful? What have we learned from this strategy that maybe didn't work? And how do we move from there? Additionally, our teams have been supporting, one example is the Angelino card distribution at family source centers across the city. Our teams are just there to ensure that everything is facilitating and running smoothly, checking in with the lead at those sites, and ensuring that everybody is practicing social distancing, again, that everything is running smoothly. So they started doing that this week, assisting HSID, and they will continue to do that, I believe, into next week. Our prevention teams are also doing that as well as they continue to provide prevention and intervention services. In regards to reentry, I do know, I actually have an example of one of the teams that I work with. They continue to maintain contact with any clients or the young person that's enrolled in services who maybe was incarcerated and was released. And they're able to, because of that consistent communication previously, they're able to connect with them and re-enroll them, if you will, in services and identify what are your needs, are there specific probation conditions that you have to follow, or anything that needs to get done, and how can we assist you with that? So it's just a lot of communication and contact. That's an example of a gang intervention agency actually that they just maintain this contact with a young person now that they've been released. He's actually going to get re-enrolled in a different area. I think he moved to a different part of the city. In regards to our juvenile reentry program and our youth diversion program, actually, I'll speak to those two. We are developing our youth diversion program. We received state funding to develop this program. And in regards to the GRID juvenile reentry program, that program we are relaunching. As maybe some of you might know, we did implement a juvenile reentry program for about almost 4 years or so. We had a slight pause, and now we will be relaunching the program very soon. This just all happened to just take place right now. We're in the middle of the procurement process for those two programs. So we're continuing to work through the procurement and selection process virtually. So we can launch in the very near future. Other than that, we continue to work with our law enforcement partners, LAPD, in regards to incidents of gang violence across the city. Our gang intervention teams continue to deploy, continue to address community dynamics across the city, and while taking safety precautions as well.
Thank you. I have a question. When it comes to personal protective equipment, are you being provided those, or are people just having to ad hoc grab some from wherever they can get some, or is that formally provided from the city?
So something that I can share is that we were able to acquire a donation of masks, and we were able to provide those to our intervention and prevention teams. So each member of the prevention and intervention team received about 1 or 2 masks that are actually reusable. They can wash their cloth. And a little bit protective equipment, like some gloves, some hand sanitizer, but that's very limited. I already distributed that, for example, to my teams, and that's about it. I do know that some teams have been very successful with partnering within their community and receiving different donations from a variety of businesses and other partners. So then they're able to have some additional equipment for themselves, or also to distribute in the community, but it all varies across the city.
Thank you. And then also, I think Julio Marcial, you had something that you wanted to share with us?
Julio, you are live. Can you hear?
Oh, yeah.
Julio, good to hear your voice. What were you going to say? You there? We can hear you. I guess.
Yeah.
Julio? Okay. We'll come back to Julio. We do have other questions. Thank you all for submitting your questions. Up next, I would like to go ahead and call up on Ryan, who has a question. Ryan.
Ryan or Raimundo?
Ryan. Okay.
You want to read the question?
Yeah, so his question was for probation. So Rohini, perhaps you can touch on this, is if the youth that are being released, do they have social distancing as a condition of their probation?
Interesting.
So I'm not sure that it's being ordered as a condition of probation, because I think it's a fairly hard thing to monitor. I do know that the young people in the facilities are being given information. We're being told on a daily basis, at least a weekly basis, about the importance of social distancing. The facilities are trying to take efforts to enforce that as much as possible with the young people that are in the facilities, at least to the extent that they identify as possible. So I'm not sure what enforcing that as a condition, as a term of their probation would do, other than to have the courts kind of admonish them about the need, as well as to have their attorneys talk to them about it. But I'm not quite sure how that would be enforced. I don't know if there are other ideas about how that could be more effective.
Well, thank you, Rohan. I hope that they are just educating them and not making it a condition, because some of us who grew up in tough neighborhoods in Los Angeles are very jaundiced toward the conditions that people get on probation. But then again, I have no facts to bear that out. It's just from life experience with friends and community members who used to find out what their probation conditions were. Everybody used to just get blown away and just couldn't believe it, which were conditions that almost any human being would have a hard time not violating.
Of course.
That's just a cynical history of our system.
I think that many share that perspective, so I appreciate that.
And then our next question, perhaps Carlos or Marlene, you can give some insight onto in regards to other minorities being affected by child abuse. This individual stated that African Americans are most affected, African American children are most affected by child abuse, and the rate amongst them is quite higher. Have you seen or have any data in regards to that specifically here within SPA 2 or this district in the San Fernando Valley?
This is Carlos. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think African American population is 9% in LA County, yet they are extremely overrepresented in the number and the calls they get to the hotline and also in foster care. I think that half the children that we have in foster care happen to be African American, so it is a big problem. And it's not just DCFS problems; it's everybody's problem. And for years we've known that, and we've done tremendous outreach and effort to really try to address the problem both internally and externally. And there has been some progress, but it's an ongoing fight that we are going to really try, continue to try to address. As to whether right now, during the last 6 weeks, whether those numbers have changed, it's too soon to tell. We'll know more later once we crunch the numbers. But traditionally, it's been extreme overrepresentation, not just in LA County, but pretty much across the country. We are all aware of it, and trust me that when we say that we take it very, very seriously, and we really do want to do the best that we can to treat everyone fairly and equally.
Great. Thank you for that, Carlos. Up next, I do want to go ahead and call on Carmelita Ramirez. Carmelita, you are now live. Can you hear us?
Yes, good morning.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. My question was specifically speaking for Boyle Heights Arts Conservatory. We are concerned for the youth that are currently incarcerated. So there's many of our youth that are not going to be released. They have had no programming for over 30 days. And I can imagine, and perhaps our friends at Mental Health can chime in, but I imagine we still have contact with some of our youth that their current mental health is really fragile. And we're very concerned at the lack of work being done through Department of Probation and LACO to help us get back in and program to these youth. So although, of course, it's very important, the youth that are being released, but the reality is many of our youth will not be released, and they are essentially in limbo. They have no programming. They know they're not going home. And this, it's a powder cake, basically. Thank you.
Michelle, this is Marlene. I wanted to say something, piggyback on Carlos, what Carlos was saying in regards to African-American families. In our SPA, actually county-wide, we are, one of the initiatives is eliminating the racial disparities and disproportionality. And in our SPA, Friends of the Family is one of our community partners that is, that we are looking into how to reduce and how to prevent child abuse and neglect. And children and families of color to, you know, to come into our system, and how can we work, how can we do more? And so one of the things that we have started is really looking at these in case by case, and providing more awareness and education to our staff in regards to some of the things that are, some of the factors that are contributing to the disproportion of Black families and families of color. And so we started the parenting programs for Black parents, so through Friends of the Family. So those are some of the ways that we are looking into, you know, into assisting more and reducing the number of children coming into our system that have been, you know, overlooked in the past.
If I may, can I add one more thing? This is Carlos.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to add, you know, earlier I mentioned that we have 20 regional offices, and a lot of times, you know, each office can be its own jurisdiction, its own separate country for that fact. It feels like it. So in order to get everybody on the same page, DCF has created an Office of Equity that's headed by Deputy Director Angela Parks-Piles, and it really is to kind of streamline the process, so the whole department is taking the same approach and really addressing the problem in a uniform way to get better results. So I think the office was established in the last 6 months or so, and it's being developed and streamlined to actually address that problem. So we're looking, because of that, to have really positive outcomes with this problem.
Thank you, Carlos. Up next, I would like to go ahead and call up on Carla Martinez. Carla, you are live.
Hi, good morning, Congressman. This is Carla Martinez with Champions in Service.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to hear you.
Okay. So I wanted to just come back to what Paco and Dr. Robert Hernandez was saying in regards to the warm handoff and what are CBOs doing. Really wanted to lift this opportunity to share with everyone that let's not really go with what we're seeing, because what we're seeing is far beyond from what our youth are experiencing at home. It's been really challenging to really get to the nitty gritty, the bottom of the barrel to really look through. We can no longer do home visits as we used to. We have a lot of challenges where we can tell from our case managers letting us know that the youth is a little bit nervous when having the Zoom meeting, that there's restriction orders that are being broken, that domestic violence is, because domestic violence restraining orders are being broken. We had a conversation with Children's Services earlier this week, and that's been a really huge challenge. Even though we want to protect our families as much as we possibly can, we're really enduring something that we've never seen before. And larger than getting creative, we really need to be so much more in tune with ourselves. And we know that we asked DCFS this week, one of our colleagues, so what do you do? Do you go by gut? What do you do? And she was saying, well, unfortunately we can't say on our reports that we are going by gut, even though we understand that there's something happening. So let's all be mindful here on the team. I know that we're here for the good of our youth. It's been driving us nuts because our kids that are serving time right now, they were isolated before. Right now, it's, it really hit a rise. So just keeping us mindful of that. CBOs are doing, unless I can speak on behalf of Champions in Service, is doing as best as we possibly can, and we're limited. We're limited in the way of providing services.
Carla.
Yes.
What contact rate do you have when it comes to being able to see person to person? Again, obviously with social distancing, and hopefully you have the personal protective equipment, et cetera, at least to actually visually go and see what's going on in somebody's, where they're at their residence or what have you. What contact rate do you have now since this pandemic?
It's low, Congressman. It's low, to be completely frank with you. It's low because the ones that really needed the service, the most vulnerable, the ones that we had a grip on, that were keeping them from preventing any chaos, are the ones that are MIA right now. And those are the ones that we're tracking down. The ones that are more settled, the ones that are cooperative. They're the ones that we have our people seeing them from a distance, and it's still, and that's the only private space where there has been, I've gotten calls from our case managers in a park, outside. We can not even sit on the benches, outside of the store, when they're dropping up groceries to the families. Today, early before the call, I had one of the case managers texting me, Carla, what's so-and-so's name? I want to get some, drop off some groceries. And that's the only way. And that's when they get to have their one-on-ones. The CIWs are doing tremendous work on the streets. And then we're also enduring a huge large problem, which is the graffiti problem. That's also been just, it's just, yeah. I'm sorry?
And so the graffiti problem has been exploding?
Yeah, the graffiti problem has been exploding. It has exploded. And right now, since the courts are closed, there's very limited community service workers or volunteers that were doing the work. So the walls, I mean, the tagging, the things that folks are writing, the grid office was gracious with one of the probation agencies to send somebody and bring the graffiti down, but it's not enough. We hear from our CIWs, you know, once we put something down and we call a specific organization that is still working with us, within the next 5 or 10, we have another problem on the other side. So it's been exploding.
Well, one of the things that I have to warn everybody about, talk about organizations that are still out there, still functioning. Every level of government is going to suffer 20, 30, 40, 50 or more % in their budget. And local governments are doing their budgets right about now for the next coming fiscal year. And one of the problems that we're having in Washington is that the president and the Republicans who are in charge of the Senate and the Republicans in the House of Representatives, as much as it affects their cities and counties and states, as much as it does those of us who are like from California, they don't want to talk about it. They don't even want to deal with it. They don't want to budget money to go down to local governments to help governments at least have some semblance of ability to balance the budget, even though with those funds, you're going to see massive cuts anyway. And they don't want to deal with it at all. And we've been able to get a modicum of support to states, and we haven't been able to get the support to local cities and counties the way we've been fighting to do. And so I'm just warning everybody that if you think it's bad right now, once you see your jurisdictions having to figure out how do we budget for next year when we have 40% less money than we had last year. And unfortunately, you're not the police department, you're not the fire department, and they're going to be the ones that are made whole as much as possible, which means you're going to be looking at other departments having to deal with more than a 40% cut. If the revenue is down by 40% and you have 2 of the biggest departments taking, trying to be made whole, maybe they take a 15% cut or 10% cut or 20% cut. That means that the other departments are going to have to figure out how to take a 70% cut in order to balance those budgets. So everybody needs to start assessing your ability to do more with less, even though you already are, but it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse.
Thank you, Congressman. We actually do have a couple more questions that I would like to get to before I know we're coming to the end of our meeting. Raimundo, you are now live.
Oh, hello, and thank you, Congressman, for putting this together and everybody who's here supporting our youth. So what we've been doing, and I wanted just to briefly touch on what we're doing to do the warm handoff. We've been, like you said, we have to work more with less, and so we're just building relationships with the psychiatric social workers, we're building relationships with the public defenders, we're building relationships with the district attorneys, so that on the front end, before the release, we're first making sure that A, we're a good fit, and B, we can support them with what their needs are going to be and their family needs. So, and thank you, Adriana, and the other folks that are working within the juvenile justice system. Those are who we've been connecting with, as well as the public defender's office, for helping and guiding us, because they'll reach out to us or we'll reach out to them, and we are reestablishing relationships so that we can go ahead and do best practices, which is for any re-entry, youth re-entry, is you started while they're inside, not outside. So on the front end, those that are going to be released, we're just, connecting. So it's a suggestion that's been working with us so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Raimundo. And also I want to take the opportunity to briefly remind everybody that I think everybody on this call is pretty darn resilient. I know many of you personally, but let me tell you, you're going to be working with people who are going to throw up their hands and say, that's it. I've never imagined it getting this bad, or budgets getting this low, or working so hard with so little, etc. And I know that many people on this call are already used to that, whether it was when you were 5 years old or when you, when you got your first job, doing what you love to do. But the bottom line is we, all of us who have that somehow, that resiliency was instilled in us, you're gonna see people give up, and you gotta be there for them. I'm talking about professionals giving up, much less your clients. I'm talking about professionals giving up. You gotta be there for them and let them know that it's bad, but giving up's only gonna make it worse.
Congress, this is Paco again. Thank you. I want to just circle back. Somebody mentioned about the programming that stopped in the juvenile halls. I just wanted to address that very quickly. And not knowing systemic issues that might be going on, or budgets with LACO and all that, but there are platforms. You can telework and have programming even with those young people in there. So I just wanted to put that in there, that I heard that, and that is critical, that even the young people, that they will be discharged. I mean, they will be released one day, but program can happen through teleworking even there. So I just wanted to add that. I didn't want that caller's question to go not answered.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paco. But also at the same time, in order for that to take place, again, there have to be individuals who actually make it happen, Paco. You're right. The possibility's there. The technology's there. The ability to do it is there. But again, if people throw up their hands and then nobody comes around to say, wait a minute, why aren't you doing that? Let me show you. Let me explain to you. Let me point you in the direction where you can actually make it happen. Because people are going to be giving up. It's a human nature thing. Too many people in America, and with all due respect, everybody, I hope I'm not offending anybody, with all due respect, especially when you get into the levels of people who actually got educated, then you have a higher percentage of people who don't know how to handle really, really heavy duty adverse situations. Because most people who grew up in tough neighborhoods, most people who grew up where you had to deal with poverty, you had to deal with being hungry. Most of those people don't go to college, but the people that we're surrounded with in our environments, the people on this call, God bless you, me, all of us, we're all educated. And the bottom line is, once you get into circles of people, then you have a minority of people who know how to say, what do you mean that's tough? Yes, it's tough, but I've seen worse. I've been through worse. You get what I'm saying? So that's my point. It's a great point, Paco. The ability to do that is there, but we can't give up. But some people are giving up, and we have to try to make sure that we get them to understand, don't give up. You can still communicate with these young people. You can still do the programming. You can do that. You're just gonna have to do it differently. And people are gonna have to cooperate with each other.
Yeah, and I'm adding on to that. I'm wondering what CBOs might be able to do, or how maybe they can connect with the detention facilities and take that initiative to do it. Because I don't think it's gonna come from here. I think they're so worried with just even providing the PPE and figuring things out here. I think it might have to be an initiative that comes from the community and saying, hey, we're still available to provide services. How can we get in there through teleconferencing, whatever that avenue might be?
Mm-hmm. And it's also gonna take people who are hardened by the idea that we're dealing with criminals here. And how can we let them be in contact with somebody from the CBO? How do we know that they're not communicating nefarious activity and using it as an excuse? I mean, that's been the bullshit line from law enforcement when it comes to people in communities that we're serving. communities that I represent. And the thing is, we can't allow that to prevail. And with all due respect, Rohana, that's the kind of thing that we need the elected officials to push back on. Because people can always make anecdotal accusations that, oh, no, we can't do that, because then all of a sudden we're gonna be just right under our noses, allowing people to do nefarious activity right under our noses. Well, that's few and far between. But the most common denominator is that we have a lot of good people, honest people, who aren't going to participate in that. And they work for our not-for-profits, and they're out there in the community, and it's for the safety and health and mental health of our young people.
Of course, I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Alfredo, you are now live. We'll move on to our next question. Alfredo, can you hear us?
Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Alfredo.
Sir, I was asking, what is law enforcement doing as far as diversion programs? Are they utilizing these programs with youth that are reoffending? And I mean, has it slowed down because of the virus? Or how is the relationship with law enforcement and the agencies they're referring to?
As far as law enforcement referring young folk to agencies out in the community?
Or youth that are involved again in the criminal activities that, you know, instead of taking them to camps or the juvenile halls, is there other programs that they're diverting them to? So,
Elizabeth, do you mind jumping on that, please?
Sure. Yeah. So on behalf of the GRID office, like I mentioned earlier, we are in development in partnership with law enforcement in designing a youth diversion program out of our office. And we're also in the process of contracting with a number of CBOs. We're still in the procurement process currently, so we don't have those CBOs identified. They will be identified pretty soon. So we will be an available resource if the youth meet eligibility for the program. And the program will only run in 3 LAPD divisions or areas of the city, in the Southeast area, in Rampart area, and Hollenbeck areas. So that's through GRID. And, but aside from that, and this isn't, you know, per se a diversion referral. Oh yes,
Elizabeth,
go ahead, Congressman.
You're pointing out a formal process, but
yes.
Other than that, right now, that is happening only ad hoc, right? If you have an officer who decides that he's not going to hook them and book them, and that he's going to say, look, kid, if I see you doing this again, blah, 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 here's, why don't you go to this organization, and here's their information.
Yeah, correct. It would be in lieu of arrest. And that program hasn't launched just yet. I just wanted to clarify that, since we're still in the process of developing this out. It would actually be in lieu of arrest. So instead of the youth being arrested, and if they're eligible, they would be referred to our program. Now, if the youth chooses not to complete the program, then there would be other steps, and I can go into that separately. But aside from a youth diversion program, anybody can visit our website, lagrid.org, and anyone can make a referral to our current programming, which is gang prevention and gang intervention services. There's eligibility criteria. It's all on the page. We actually get a number of referrals from law enforcement. They're not necessarily diversion referrals at all. It's just a referral because they just happen to have contact with the youth. Doesn't mean that they were about to arrest them or anything like that. It's just a resource that's available for anyone to refer to us. It's an online referral system. So currently that's available. The youth diversion program is in development currently.
And Congressman, if I can respond on behalf of the county.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So early on, the sheriff convened all of the local law enforcement agencies across the county to ask that all arrests for non-serious, non-violent cases be essentially put on hold because they were trying to decrease admissions to the jail as much as possible. And then that was reiterated by the probation department on the youth side. So at this point, there has been a significant drop in both arrests as well as admissions to the jails and the juvenile halls. And then the county developed a youth diversion and development office a couple of years ago out of a partnership with, and out of years of advocacy by youth justice groups and kind of community-based organizations across the county. And that office has actually rolled out a similar program to what Elizabeth was describing on the county side. So there are at least, I believe, 13 community-based organizations, and they've recently brought additional organizations as well as law enforcement agencies on board, where individual law enforcement agencies are essentially paired with a CBO, and in lieu of arrest, if the young person and their families consent, the young person is diverted instead to a community-based organization with a myriad of services. Since the pandemic, those organizations have essentially stepped up to say we will take on more cases, and we will provide more capacity for young people who might otherwise have not been eligible for our services. So that has definitely been an effort that the Youth Diversion and Development Office has been spearheading to try and keep young people out of the probation system as much as possible.
Rohini, thank you for that update. I do have a question. I'm very familiar with GRID in the city of LA. I used to be a councilman when it was developed. But at the county level, those not-for-profits that are working in the system that has been developed at the county level, are they contracted at all to do that work with county funds, or they happen to be not-for-profits that serve your county constituents and they partner with the county?
So through the Youth Diversion and Development Office, they're receiving funding through, it's actually under the Department of Health Services, under the Office of Diversion and Reentry. And so they are a separate non-law enforcement related stream of funds. Some of their funding is given by probation over to that office. And so that office has been able to develop more flexible contracting mechanisms than have existed previously, particularly with the probation department. So those are directly contracted with the county. And then there are other CBOs that are kind of subcontracted through those organizations that receive a mix of county funds and other funding.
Well, thank you, Rohini. You actually made me smile a little bit because I wrote a law about 20 years ago called the Shift Cardenas Act. And that's exactly what those funds were meant to be used for. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
And we appreciate your work on that. That has been much of the starting point of a lot of this evolution. So we appreciate it.
Yes, up next, I do have Dr. Velasquez, who would like to share some information in regards to LACO and the resources available for youth within the detention facilities. Dr. Velasquez?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, doctor. Go ahead.
Hello. So yeah, I also posted on the chat, we did start to use our technology to provide remote instruction in our halls and our camps, and that's actually going really, really well. It's very exciting to see our youth actually participating with their teachers. They're giving a lot of positive feedback around that. So we're expanding that and real excited about that. We've also started conversations with a few of the CBOs on how to develop programming. Since things are now flexible and can be done a little bit different, we're excited to be able to do that. So I did provide on the chat the website, our website that has our contact information for anybody that wants to reach out. But I know that some of our folks in our offices are already working with CBOs to get the programming up and going using the technology.
Great. And how much of that or programming have they been able to utilize when it comes to preparing them for reentry?
Right now, we still have our multidisciplinary teams that are meeting. They're not using the tech per se, but they're having telephone conferences or meetings. I do appreciate those folks in this call because I've written down names, and hopefully you can contact folks and make sure that we get some key people in those multidisciplinary team meetings that are discussing transition plans. So we're definitely strengthening that, wanting to strengthening that. And I believe it's just a matter of connecting, right? All of us connecting with the right people and getting the right people involved so that we can strengthen that.
Thank you, doctor. We're going to give Julio one more chance to say something or ask a question. There you are.
Hello,
Okay,
Julio.
you're on.
Thank you, Congressman Cardenas. I apologize, as you can imagine, during this time, much like what has been said for the last hour and a half, the plight of young people who are currently behind bars is a every second situation. And also want to thank Rohini for her leadership at Supervisor Solis. Without her and others, we would not have seen hundreds of young people be released over the last few weeks. Still one too many. I just wanted to add, there's been a lot of conversation about the capacity of organizations to serve young people. And I just wanted to share and to piggyback off what Rohini mentioned around the Division of Youth Diversion and Development. About 14 months ago, the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council in LA, which now includes 10 voting members from the community, for the first time in the history of LA, young people who've been impacted by this system, as well as others, are on the voting council. And they approved a new initiative, which we call Ready to Rise. And at that time, the county allocated about $3.5 million to support, in public dollars, to support their community-based infrastructure, to support those young people who are currently incarcerated, as well as those that are going home, as well as those that were at the highest risk of entering the system. Fast forward 14 months later, the initiative is now $26 million. We are in partnership with 50 plus organizations across the county, including, for example, Tia Chucha, PCITI, and others, who have been longtime frontline service providers, and providing them the much needed public resources, in addition to getting a general operating support grant, meaning unrestricted between $150,000 to $200,000 per year. We're also providing them a very intensive capacity building, coaching around financial analysis, program development. Why? If we're gonna shrink and close the system in LA, which is the largest in the country, we're going to put more pressure on the nonprofit infrastructure, but they need resources, but we also need to help them build incrementally. So if we're asking Tia Chucha to expand in the next 5 years, it's not just going to be about money. It's going to be about staffing and overhead and financial analysis. So I just want to commend you, Congressman, because again, this started with your legislation almost 2 decades ago. And I know that you've been fighting tooth and nail to ensure that that money gets to the people who most deserve it and are most closest to the issue. So again, more than happy to share a lot of the feedback. They are providing remote services to young people in the halls and camps. They are providing and supporting the case management plans that the department is supposed to do. But to your point, we need the organizing, the advocacy that's relentless, that's unapologetic to continue, because without that pressure, those kids don't come home. So just want to thank you for the few minutes to brief you on some exciting developments, as well as the leadership inside and outside of government at this point.
Look, thank you, Julio. That's another perfect example of what we imagined 20 years ago should be happening. And finally, thank you for that great report about how it's actually happening and with real dollars. And we need more. The Chief Cardenas Act has been providing approximately $25 to $30 million per year from the state of California into the county of Los Angeles. And unfortunately, too much of that money wasn't being directed in a way that you just described. So, but finally, we're getting there. I guess I can stay in Congress instead of running for supervisor. It seems like they're finally getting it together over there. So thank you. I would love to stay on much longer, but I want to respect all of your time. I know you're all taxed. We went 10 minutes over the time allotted. We will do this again. Hopefully we'll do it soon. And every time we get together beyond the call, we need to continue to communicate and send information to each other so that we can all be on the same page, because lives are being lost on a daily basis. And I'm not just talking about people who stop breathing. People give up hope. And these are the toughest times we've seen in 100 years. And that means it's tough for the people who don't even know what it's like to have it tough. So you can imagine the people that we're talking about on this call, the service providers and the young people and their families. Keep up the good work. Don't give up. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. And once again, I would like to thank you all, our presenters, every single one of you for joining us. Carlos, Paco, Marlene, Elizabeth, Adriana, Rohini, everybody, thank you again for joining us. As you can see, this is something that's very near and dear to the Congressman's heart, and the fact that you guys continue to work, you know, through the most difficult of times with the, you know, very limited resources that you have, just it says tremendous things about you all. So again, thank you for joining us today. As a quick reminder, please note that our office is open to answer questions Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Our telephone number is 818-221-3718. My email address is Michelle, MICHELLE Vergara, V as in Victor, ERGARA @mail.house.gov. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay blessed.
Thank you so
Stay
much.
blessed.
Alrighty.